distribution network is mainly present at the local level, as we announced in the second part. This network is made up of neighborhood warehouses and managers of different product categories. On the one hand, with the locals to identify current needs, local habits and special orders, and on the other hand, with the national managers who oversee all coordination as well as the possibility of contacting all production sites. Housing is affected by a service linked directly to the activities exchange, according to the number of occupants in the household. This means frequent changes in allocation between the variation in the number of occupants and the possible migration of households throughout the country. Neighborhood resources, in addition to places of leisure, grounds and sports halls, music, entertainment, are an effective palliative to the most just size of housing allocated to homes in the neighborhood. Office libraries replace libraries in each accommodation. Guest rooms replace the guest rooms that are absent from the accommodation rooms that would often remain empty. Self-restaurant rooms avoid having oversized living dining rooms in the accommodation for rare receptions. Storage rooms with locked compartments replace unpleasant cellars. Means of transport allocated locally by the National Transport Network. A neighborly relationship in the spirit of brotherhood is a necessary link between the individual and society. Without being an obligation of permanent contact, it requires the maintenance of a network of neighbors on the one hand according to the affinities of each other, or on the other hand by sharing a respectful contact with the willingly lonely neighbors. This network allows discussions at the local level of political choice at the national level. It makes it possible to clarify something for some or to request the intervention of competent people to explain was it not understood locally. Likewise, these local contacts make it possible to help citizens who are in physical or psychological health difficulties according to local resources, or if not, to call on the competent people who they would have difficulty to take note of all the people in difficulty of their area. We can also have digital neighborhood relationships, that is to say, between people who share the same pole of interest and who can thus ensure the same role as neighborhood neighbors within the limits of what is expressed on digital, because having assignments is not enough to note certain difficulties of its opposite. Finally, there are proposals that do not constitute an obligation of local presence, but to which we must be able to take action in response because they have a strong local impact. Those are: first proposition, the treatment of madness. The incentive to educate our children with love prevents them from getting lost in isolation or facing disturbing behaviors that make them confused about the reason for their existence and thus switch to a certain madness or a very rough life. The neighborly relationship also avoids involuntary isolation and the loss of reason which can follow by always rehashing the same problematic facet of a question. Also avoid suicide or sporadic aggressive behavior. There remains sweet madness and furious madness. Perhaps the former can be relieved via the neighborly relationship by taking up the attitude of formerly, which consisted in welcoming the simple-minded people who wandered through the villages and accompanying them from neighbor to neighbor. But as with furious madness, it is above all necessary that competent people begin to get along with each other, which, as we have seen, has not been a long, calm river throughout the history of the madness, and that they indicate the best way to manage these problems. Today we hide in the neighborhood the problems of a person who can be dangerous for those around them. But in a fraternal society, where the last thing to do is to stigmatize someone, it would be undoubtedly be good if this kind of secret is lifted and that the neighborhood, on the contrary, is made aware of what to do to help the person and what not to do. The ball is in the court of the competent persons. Second proposition, the treatment of incompetence. What could be more annoying than having to deal with a person who has position authority and who impose an answer, conduct, sanction, etc. that one feels is manifestly unsuitable, and the height is reached when it is without a word of explanation and without possible recourse. Already, we made it clear in the introduction that we no longer accept positional authority, so this case should not happen. But there are many forms of incompetence. A person may be incompetent because she does not have sufficient training or education, because she is not in the right place, she is not made for that she was authorized, because she has obsolete knowledge, because she doesn't know how to use cooperation with her peers to improve her skills. And the worst, when the person is convinced that she is excellent. To overcome this, there are solutions. Perfect training retrains the person on another path of activity, allows the person to acquire other skills in parallel, etc. The incompetent person, no longer having to fear a downgrading or what comes to the same thing, unemployment, she will no doubt be more open considering its development. But above all, it is at the initial phase of validation of the competence that it may be necessary to review things. If at a theoretical instruction phase over a variable period, the time that the person assimilates the concepts, the procedures, etc., we follow a conditioning phase with experienced colleagues or alternately in parallel, and that it is these colleagues who validate the skill and not a series of multiple choice questions and an oral of a few minutes on some aspects of the skill, so we will no doubt have progressed. Belonging to a cooperative network where competition no longer exists promotes the exchange of information and self-training for groups, and to prevent someone from going astray in a field that ultimately doesn't suit them, in situ experience during schooling or before starting the final training, because it is better to avoid presenting a dissection to an adolescent who is not ready for such a spectacle, just as we are not going to send him to dig a 50 meters trench with a pickaxe and shovel, which is of little interest. But here too, the training masters must be educational and competent to avoid the opposite effect of disgusting someone to whom this activity would have been perfectly suited. Finally, to return to the initial example, it is not excluded that despite everything, someone does not have to deal with someone incompetent. We will avoid the misdiagnosis due to conditions where fatigue, misunderstanding, etc. could have led to an interview spinning down, and incompetence has nothing to do with it. The person feels she has dealt with incompetence must have recourse either to another local competent person to whom she can express her feelings, or to National Control Center, as we saw in the second part. From there, it will be up to the competent person contacted or to the NCC to follow up on this request, and at the end of the process to give a response to the person who thinks she has suffered the effect of incompetence. Of course, corporatism behaviors that cover an incompetence should not be put in place, but these behaviors would be contrary to a fraternal attitude. Either the competent person contacted on site has the means to confirm or deny the reported incompetence, or they can in turn contact the NCC, which has all means to investigate. The solutions we listed above can be a part of the solution. A problem may remain if one is within the limits of competence of an area, in which case no one can provide a reliable answer. It is up to the NTPs concerned, in collaboration with the NCC, or even with a call to all citizens for what may concern them, to examine whether an answer can be given or not. We have now gone through this document. Other videos, like housing, are available for a more detailed presentation, and we invite you to watch them. You can also consult the Register of Controversies on the website torrederivante.org and make your contribution. Note, the site is built on the discussion of a fraternal society. We can bring additional elements, but also elements calling into question certain propositions with arguments, of course. Cookie cutter denials will not be accepted, as well as admiring compliments. You will see that there is no system for counting opinions for or against, because it is a site that presents the proposals and their possible disadvantages, but then it is up to everyone to think about it. There is no place for general opinion on this site. You can also set up a new neighborhood relationship and bring to it the spirit of brotherhood while remaining in this capitalist system, because you have to survive, but without making any contribution that would give it arguments to justify itself. Counting on the snowball effect of this attitude is all that can be hoped for first, as these proposals are incomprehensible by the media and social networks, and so great are the differences between social groups, and there are so many antagonistic groups of thoughts. The juxtapositions of simple individuals carrying stereotypical slogans and individual adrift. So, for what outcome of such a project if one day everyone is convinced of its feasibility, because he will have discussed all the aspects which concern him, that he will possibly have made the modification or the additions which it will have seemed important. Then, no need for demonstrations endlessly, no need for a general strike, no need for a revolution. The state no longer institutions but us, the citizens. So the states will simply apply the proposals that have been validated and where everyone will know its place.
Close to